You guys remember this guy, the Nano Q from Thorzone? Well, I had some critiques in our review, some things that I said, oh, I wish I had done this instead. They've already responded and they're like, hey, we hear you and here's what we're doing. So I wanted to kind of do a follow-up to this case review before I even got a chance to build in it, because now I want to wait for the revised version. Yeah, let's talk about it. Let's talk about why companies like this literally are like, it's such a breath of fresh air versus the crap we're used to dealing with around here. The Corsair A115 high-performance tower CPU air cooler features a copper cold plate and 6 6mm heat pipes for high-efficiency thermal transfer. 2 Corsair AF140 Elite PWM fans boast Corsair's air guide technology for concentrated airflow and durable fluid dynamic bearings at speeds of up to 1600 RPM. Slim slide and lock fan mounts enable variable mounting height for wide compatibility with most systems. To see the full list of specs of the all-new Corsair A115 tower cooler, follow the sponsored link in the description below. So this is the Nano Q from Thorzone. They come in 2 sizes, the S and the R, 11 liters and 16 liters worth of volume for a mini ITX build. If it looks like a cheese grater, I think it's because it's very Apple inspired. You know, what's funny is, if I were to tell Phil like, hey, check out this Apple case, he would totally believe it's an Apple case, like if he didn't know any better. I'll put a link down below, but our initial unboxing teardown review showing you how it works, there was a couple of things in this build that stood out to me as problems. And I kind of want to go over those again right now and then show you what their response is and their renders and how they're applying it to every single production version of the case. Because one of the things I refuse to do in working with brands is get involved in their Kickstarter phase. I will not be involved in companies taking money for something they're not ready to produce or even guarantee, I guess, that will ever come. I'm not saying that that's what Thorzone would do, but I've seen it in the past, so I refuse to ever get involved in Kickstarter stuff. It needs to be ready for production. Fortunately, by them sending me this case when they did and giving them the critiques that I did, came at just the right time between mass production. It's between engineering sample and mass production, and these are easy fixes they were able to implement that every single case that they send out to end user customers will have. So there won't be like, oh, the first batch doesn't have it, the second batch will. They all will have it, which I think is great. And that's what's fun about working with small companies, is they can pivot and adapt quickly. Whereas every big brand is like, well, it's gonna take some time, and then maybe in our next revision next year, you know, maybe we'll give people like a $15 coupon code that didn't get it, or it's stupid stuff like that, right? This is actually like fun to work with small companies that are like, yeah, we can do that, we'll do it quick. In fact, it's barely been a week since we did this video, and they've already implemented the fixes. So the first fix, in fact, let me open this up, if I remember how to do this, so that I can get this out. Yes, if you haven't seen this case, that's probably like, what the heck did he just do? And yeah, I hear y'all, this is extruded, not milled. Well, the holes are milled, but I'm not an aluminum magician, okay? I don't know how any of that crap works. An aluminum guy. So major problem number 1 is these handles don't come pre-attached. And the reason for that is you can use this chassis in a bunch of different orientations. Standing up on the handles like I've already showed, or you can put the rubber feet in any of these holes, and then you can put it like long ways like this. Like I'm starting to think the more I look at this case, I would probably end up using it like this on the table rather than upright. Only because it's a little tippy when it's upright. Like I feel like the feet should be a little bit wider, but whatever. That would probably be a major redesign in this handle. Like it would have to like be a 90 there and then come out wider, but whatever. I think most people would probably use it on the desk like that with the rubber feet underneath it. But anyway, the issue was to attach these handles, you had to remove these little screws, and they're very difficult to see. We'll get some close-up shots here. There's these little flathead screws that go through this rod and into this cap. So this is like a steel cap. I do believe this is steel. As you can see, it's just round. So that little flathead screw right there, you've got to loosen the screw, which is just threading into this cap. So this cap plugs a hole where that handle goes in. Now the cap, as you can see, is round. So as you're trying to remove the screw, it's just wanting to spin the cap. And what made it worse is the fact that because they didn't want anything like rattling loose or whatever, there's a slight amount of Loctite on these screws. Yeah, it's blue Loctite, it's nothing crazy. I'm not about to apply any heat to this, because even a heat gun probably would have helped, but I didn't want to discolor the metal or anything in any way. So you'll notice there's some scratching and stuff on the screws, and it's like kind of bent a little bit because the flathead screwdriver can't go in straight because of the fact that it's through that center of the rod, so it goes in kind of at an angle. And then as you're trying to turn, it's wanting to jump out because of the Loctite. And although this is an engineering sample that was manually put together, they did say they might have gotten a little bit liberal with the Loctite. So that's, they were like, sorry about that. And I'm like, well, there's gotta be a better way, because what I ended up doing was, and I fortunately was able to do this without scratching the aluminum, but I took a razor blade, like a thin, like box cutter razor blade, and kind of wedged it between the cap and the aluminum body in the recess hole. You can't tell because his handle's there, that's recessed. So the handle's going into the metal. So I was able to create like a wedge that would give me just enough resistance to make it eventually turn. So the very first thing they implemented, and this probably isn't gonna be all that cheap, because this isn't some like off the shelf machined steel cap. Like I'm sure these are being made specifically for this. It would be super cheap if they were able to just like, hey, we'll take these off the shelf and just use them. But these are being made for this particular use. So what they ended up doing was coming up with this. So essentially it's the exact same like cap, only they've added like a nipple to it, for lack of a better term. It looks like a side profile of a very happy boob. Okay, I don't know how else to say it. But that nipple keeps it from being able to turn inside the hole. So that means they probably wouldn't even need to necessarily use Loctite either now when they're putting it together, but because it doesn't turn, they could actually get that screw pretty snug. The one thing I did mention in this whole mechanism that I wish they had was maybe an Allen head screw instead of the flathead screw. No mention of that in the email. So maybe we still have to deal with the flatheads, but you know what? It'll be a lot easier now, the fact that this cap can't turn. So already you can see the company made a choice to, I don't know how many of these they had made already. They haven't started like full scale production yet, so I assume there's not a lot of these made, but it's not gonna, this is something that's turned on like an industrial lathe kind of a deal, right? That's just, it's a machine that's just turning them, lathing them, chopping them, and just, there you go, it's easy. It's gonna be a bit more work now to be able to machine that nipple in there. So they're incurring additional manufacturing costs, I'm sure, probably not a huge cost, but definitely more expensive than this, because of the fact that they recognized like, hey, this is maybe a problem. It's probably something people would only have to go through like once, but just one of those did not want to come off. I was able to get it off, but I was starting to think like, dang, maybe I'm not gonna be able to put the handles on. And that's not a good customer experience especially for a premium product like this that's well over $300 for this case. The other thing we talked about, and this was a more major problem as far as I'm concerned, is the GPU mount. So as you can see, this skeleton here, or the spine as they're calling it, it's all rod, it's all steel rod, right? And steel rod that's been kind of milled and made flat so that we have our light bar attached to it and all that sort of stuff. And then you can see right here, we have this adjustable riser that allows us to mount our GPU, but for tall GPUs, we can push the riser down to get the top farther away from the top of the case. We don't have any issues with cabling and stuff. But the only place it mounts is right here. And this is almost more like a plug. So you can see that has two adjustable positions. There's a screw hole right above it, and then we're in the lower position right now because we did drop it down. So if I just take our 4080 and sort of like slot that in there real quick. So it's all fine and dandy, until you realize, as I just tilted it right there, the GPU wanted to fall out. So it doesn't have anything holding it in place up here, which is normally where most of the weight is taken in a case, is something attaches to there. And then as you do that a few times, that screw loosens and then it doesn't hold its position. So what I said was this would be a terrible transport type of case, meaning if you had small form factor, you're probably going to LAN parties, or most people I know that are super into SFF like to travel on airplanes to go to LAN parties and stuff, and you might be thinking like, who does that? I know people that do that. Okay, it's a very real, obvious thing. So this would not be a comfortable solution for traveling in a Pelican case or something and not having this like flop out of its position. So what they're gonna be doing is right along here. So remember, this whole thing can shift up and down and in and out, okay? So right now we have it sort of shifted, but they are gonna be milling a long port right here that also has a metal block that's gonna go on top of the corner right here that then threads into it. So you're gonna have this block threaded into the GPU, and then that block threaded into a long slot on the frame right here, we'll call it the GPU frame, that then is gonna give us at least our second major point of contact. So there's 3 points of contact when the GPU is attached. There is the slot itself, and you don't want that taking load. You don't want that being load bearing. That will break. It's plastic and small pins, right? The second place is where I already showed you where that screw is. That's normally in a normal case where those will like rest in a slot, so it takes weight. And then the third point of contact is the top screws, which hold that down so it can't possibly pop out of that slot. So without this there, as you can see right now, watch, I can just pull it up. Well, I guess I could if that screw was looser, but anyway, so that's gonna allow us now to have that third point of contact, which is desperately needed. To me, this was the biggest concern of the current design. The other stuff like the screws and all that, I mean, that's problematic, but it's not major. This is major. The last thing you want is damage to your motherboard. No, I guess it wouldn't be your motherboard. This is a riser cable. You don't want to damage your riser cable. You don't want to damage the slot on your GPU. You don't want it flopping around and banging inside your case. You don't want to damage a fan or your wires. Because if we had wires attached to this right now and it wanted to flop out, it could be yanking on the wires. We know how the 12 volt high power plug is. We don't want to put any undue stress on that. So anyway, I'm actually realizing just how good the Founders card looks in here. Like we did with our review, we used the Strix card to see how one of the biggest cards on the market would work. As you can see, we'd still have room for a radiator and a fan right here, because this does have a fan and rad that can mount right there. So maybe if I were to do like an AIO or whatever, I don't know, whatever. I just like to look at build cases and think about what the builds could potentially be like. So I'm gonna go ahead and get on out of here. This video is probably longer than it needed to be, but I wanted to sort of show you this is what I love about working with brands like Thorzone, is the fact that it doesn't take that, they're not this giant aircraft carrier of a ship. Although I shouldn't use aircraft carrier as an example, they're very maneuverable. They are not the new Icon of the Seas, largest cruise ship in the world that just made its way into Miami, that literally looks like a city. Yes, we've all seen giant cruise ships. This thing is absolutely redonkulous. It takes a long time to turn that sucker in a different direction. They are a speedboat. They're literally like, we're water skiing behind this thing because they are so maneuverable. And that's what I love about small companies that are just, are able to be like, hey, we've got design people that are doing nothing but working on this right now. So let's make this change, let's make it happen. And they came up with the solution so quickly. And that's the thing, is we were like, oh yeah, there needs to be a thing. I didn't know what that thing needed to be, but they did. They saw my reaction and they were like, hey, here's how we'll do it. And I love that they came up with it. And you know, I like that the new caps are kind of booby shaped. I mean, that's fun. So, all right. Thanks. I don't know what, it's time to go, okay? The more I talk, the more I'm gonna dig myself into YouTube jail, okay? All right, guys, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Links below, go watch the review and check out the brand.